Explosive singles and powerful storytelling ignite the fire of Doechii's third mixtape, Alligator Bites Never Heal. The mixtape brings with it punchy, unforgettable lyrics in combination with Doechii's sense of playful humor and her limitless imagination. She tackles everything from her identity to relationships and the various punches taken with each. The mixtape moves through ever-changing beats and melodies, in the end winning Doechii the Grammy Award for Best Rap Mixtape at the 67th Annual Grammy Awards, ranking her as the third woman to win in this category. Doechii continues to stun and aim high in her musical prowess, and this fiery mixtape with its cover art to match makes for a musical appetite that is satiated and yet somehow still ready for more. Together, we'll examine why Doechii's portrait staging and overall mixtape cover is so effective. To do that, we'll reach for tools in both art theory and art history to create an artistic analysis of the image and to define parallels for us to appreciate why this cover just works. Of the many elements, we're going to use three to examine this piece: space, color, and texture. Let's begin with space. Space refers to the positive and negative areas of an artwork, or where an image is being filled and where it is left blank. Examining the use of space in this portrait, we see that our main character is staged along the right side of the frame. Already, Doechii's presence demands us to look at her, to perceive her, and challenges us in pushing us to an off-center orientation. Following this sense of placement of objects, her pose itself also adjusts her limbs and the alligator that she holds at interesting and intriguing angles, making this use of positive space busy and detail-driven. Per by observation, the golden ratio could also be observed at work in this mixtape cover, as well as when looking at regard to placement. To quote Adobe for some further context, the golden ratio, also known as the golden number, golden proportion, or the divine proportion, is a ratio between two numbers that equals approximately 1.618. It is an old and storied number and ratio that has been observed since Greek history and even earlier. This mathematical relationship, observable in man-made structure as well as in nature itself, is seen as a perfectly repeating pattern with a predictable mathematical sequence, which makes naturally pleasing or effective construction. Placing this golden ratio generated spiral atop of this cover, we could see how the focal points also naturally align well within the curves of the spiral. Further discussing visual weight, we notice that the alligator proportionally looks to be the size of Doechii herself, if not larger. In actuality, we see more of the body of the gator rather than we do of Doechii herself, and yet it is clear that Doechii is the dominant focus here. The spacing of her body and the alligator in the portrait along the right creates then an intriguing and uncanny portrait, which introduces quite a bit of shock value. This leads her audience to begin a more thorough examination of the visual imagery connected to this album. Now, let's discuss color. A dark forest green is the unifying color throughout this piece, and we can see echoes of this color in the darker brown hues of the wooden floor, the intricate rug beneath her, and throughout her outfit. Not only does this hue suit Doechii's complexion beautifully, but it evokes a sense of earthy tones, harkening back to Doechii's self-proclaimed world of the swamp. Doechii looks as though she is shining, the dark hues around her making her pop. The subtle use of complementary color scheme could also be observed as well, albeit an intricate detail. Complementary color schemes incorporate colors which sit opposite one another on the color wheel. In this sense, we can examine and locate several hues of red and green that are woven throughout staging the portrait, red and green being the complementary colors. From the warm, earthy browns and reds in the rug to the soft touches of pink and red-orange in her outfit, Doechii pushes back on the green which is surrounding her in subtle ways, introducing intriguing, smaller pops of color and detail, making yet another visually interesting and appealing staging of her portraiture. Lastly, let's take a look at the texture in this piece. Texture in art refers to what you might think of when you hear that word, how something feels. We can imagine, thanks to visuals, what something might feel like, and that naturally evokes memories, emotions, or associations. In this portrait, we can note that the rug beneath Doechii looks soft. The patterns look detailed and the rug looks worn and shaggy, something comforting to us in the portrait, although we've never seen it before. That familiarity of a rug's soft texture is then contrasted by the stiff qualities of the brown armchair that she's sitting in. The armchair echoes the beautiful browns of Doechii's skin, and it too shines in the light. It is firm and it embodies both a strong curve on the left as well as a sharper, clean edge on the right. Together, the rug and the chair create a scenery with varied texture and visual dynamicism, playing further with interest, and perhaps even suggesting a sharp, witty, or vulnerable side of Doechii herself in the textures we observe of this visual world. Further, the alligator stands out, of course. It has a bumpy, coarse texture. Its scales are clearly visible. It rests atop a fuzzy-looking skirt piece that Doechii wears across her lap, again bringing together two very different textures to then create a new meaning for the mixtape's artwork. Because the alligator is pictured in a relaxed pose and clearly in control of Doechii herself, we observe a sense of power and ease simultaneously in Doechii's expression. The textures at work here continue to build and play with the visual contrast, making the mixtape cover clever in its approach and astoundingly subtle in its symbolism. Now that we've used our art elements to truly dive into this visual representation, let's move on to analyzing the work using art principles. Let's begin with emphasis. Emphasis, meaning the components of an art piece that act as focal points, which command a viewer's attention in an art piece, can be observable clearly throughout this portraiture. Due to the aforementioned art elements at work of space, color, and texture, the spotlight on Doechii here is unabashedly clear, and she is asking us to examine her and her work to the last detail. Immediately, we notice the weight and presence of Doechii as she shares with us a bold, take-up-the-room presence to frame her portrait. And yet, with Doechii's calm and cool demeanor, she contrasts yet again a loud buildup of the mixtape cover with all of the various elements at work. Doechii appears to us confident and in command of her space, although the various details are quite loud in their emphasis points. Next, let's look at balance. In this cover art, we can observe asymmetrical or informal balance. The placement of Doechii in the frame, as off to the right, introduces an altered sense of balance and focus, and the alligator only helps to solidify that visual weight as creating an anchor on the right side. With such a humble, hyper-detailed portrait, overall, everything comes together to create an intriguing visual that we can look at again and again. Now that we have examined the cover of Alligator Bites Never Heal using art theory, let's take a look at influence and symbolism to bring the world of this album together for a deeper appreciation of the work. To begin, let's take a step back in time to the 1970s, where Doechii might be drawing some of her influence from. In this portrait, Doechii looks as though she is channeling the earlier artist Minnie Riperton in her album Adventures in Paradise. Minnie brought in a wistful and masterful vocal quality to a soul jazz-driven album in this specific work. Similarly, Minnie Riperton's voice qualities and skillful blending of tone to match different styles is reminiscent of Doechii's own talents as well. Tying together Doechii's album to such a powerhouse of soul is a clever move to create a meaningful space in musical and historical context for Doechii to then walk upon on the world stage. Now let's examine more regarding the white alligator on Doechii's lap. First, let's dive back to Doechii herself. She says, quote, "In my research about alligator attacks, I found that a common thread in each survivor was the main reason that they survived. It was because they fought back. This mixtape is my fight back. I am nobody's prey. I was born to be a predator." Further quoting an article and interview from the 45 discussing this, they report, "The reference to alligators in the title of the mixtape was not just a nod to wildlife lurking in the swamps to her native Florida, but also to parallels that Doechii drew between herself and the prey that manages to evade the grip of the animal. She'd learned that alligators kill their prey underwater with a death roll, spinning and spinning with their future meal locked helplessly in their jaws, which simultaneously drowns and is then dismembered. Though she envisioned herself not as prey but as a predator, life was treating her like the opposite." End quote summary. Further, Doechii wrote on her social media with the mixtape's release, quote, "This past year I've grappled with what felt like a relentless death roll in my life. A death of drowning in my own vices, battling differences with my label, creative numbness that broke me." End quote. So within all of this context, we can now see that taking on this animal as being a symbol positions Doechii in a place of self-reflection and acknowledgement. She shares with us a deep sense of understanding that the alligator she was fighting was much bigger than herself, and that in the end, she was able to tame it and now sits perched on a throne, it placed orderly in her lap. To speak to the specific species of this alligator, the Audubon Zoo shares the following information. The rare leucistic white alligator, described as ethereal, ghostly, and most frequently beautiful. They have a translucent white skin and deep blue eyes with a hint of pigmentation. End quote. Bringing in this imagery of ethereal feelings, ghostly alligators, and beauty found with rarity in the environment, we can clearly see how Doechii is connecting these associations with her lore and her image. Now, let's look at the scene with the chair and consider it instead as a throne. In that context, we could be reminded of the classic mafia scene in which the Godfather is perched with a cat on his lap. Here, instead of the Godfather, we have Doechii, dressed in casual business attire, clearly at the helm of her own decision-making now, and prepared to smile in irony about the challenges that she has pushed past to become who she is now upon the throne today. Further, we know that thrones throughout history have been used to distinguish the person sitting there as being in a position of power. Doechii refers to herself as the Swamp Princess, and with this staging, she could not be more right. She holds the reins, controlling the alligator, dressed in a beautifully punchy business blended outfit, beaming on a swamp green background. She is royalty, and she knows that she is ready to be seen as such in the hip-hop world. Here, Doechii is assuming her own throne now, one that she has built by herself and carved out in the genre. Connecting back to Minnie Riperton, we can see that Doechii is staging herself as an authority in the rap and hip-hop world, looking back to what came before her, but also brandishing a bravado to move beyond that and create something entirely new. Now that we've delved deeper into the influences and symbolism that Doechii applies in this cover artwork, we'll reach back further into art history to cross-compare her portrait with others to make some intriguing conclusions. First, going back to Leonardo da Vinci's artworks, there's a curious portrait to examine, some interesting parallels to Doechii's own portrait as well. Lady with an Ermine, a portrait painting from the Italian Renaissance, painted in late 1400s, depicts Cecilia Gagliarani, a mistress of the Duke of Milan. This portrait is only the second surviving portrait today of the 4 portraits that Da Vinci painted of women, one of the others being the Mona Lisa. Comparing these 2 portraits, let's draw out some uncanny similarities between the 2 for a richer understanding. First, we can see that the character of Lady of the Ermine is positioned using, quote, a pyramidic spiral, end quote. This was because, quote, Da Vinci had a lifelong preoccupation with dynamics and movement, end quote, in his studies and work. Not dissimilarly, Doechii is positioned mid-movement herself, with her arms actively working to hold the alligator up that seems only tame for a moment. The lady with the ermine also holds the ermine, or as it is also called, a stoat, actively in place as well, using her fingers to position the stoat in place. Both portraits apply a use of striking dark background so that their subjects pop out and their silhouettes and characteristics are made even more noticeable as an end result. Both women have highly information-rich outfits with colors and meaning, and both hold white animals, which connect back to symbolism of the time or to the person. Another intriguing portrait to draw into this discussion from art history is Frida Kahlo's self-portrait with thorn necklace and hummingbird. This portrait is similar to Doechii's portrait as well, in that both employ a use of rich greens to frame the subject, and both use animals to convey symbolism. According to FridaKahlo.org, quote, in this portrait, Frida Kahlo faces the viewer with a background of large green leaves and a yellow leaf right behind her. The thorns around her act like a necklace, which is held by a black monkey. Her neck is bleeding from piercing thorns. On the right side behind her shoulder is a black cat. A hummingbird is hanging on the thorn, which knots around her throat. Her expression is calm and solemn. Sadly, Frida Kahlo, due to a bus accident, spent much of her life in pain and suffering, and so this could be an extension of her dealing with that pain and suffering as well in this portraiture. Now, bringing all together this additional art history into analyzing these pieces, we can see that both women are pictured with symbols or challenges of their pain. They share a determined and controlled expression despite their circumstance, and instead they allow the audience to interpret them as characters and to think deeper about them and their staging, which creates a much more intimate connection between the artist and the portrait, as well as the artist and their audience. Lastly, I find that Doechii is a master artist when it comes to irony. She says, quote, it just comes down to my love for satire, but it's interesting because it's not necessarily satirical. It's not funny to me, but I think that I like doing it because maybe it makes other people digest it better. and they can kind of face themselves through my music, it's easily digestible that way. There is a funniness, there's a seriousness, and there's an irony deeply ingrained to the topics that Doechii brings to light on this mixtape. Further channeling those ironies into her cover art, we can see that she shows a stoic, calm expression while she handles something that is a symbol of danger and confusion to her, something that she has now tamed and seems utterly at ease with, that irony playing further with the audience. All together with the visuals that she shares with us, introduce reflective sides of herself and create a compelling, brash, and very vulnerable story about her life. The backstory that she shares and creates images around makes for an enduring, self-critical, and ironic musical impression, which is lasting both beyond the album as well as herself. In conclusion, Doechii is a master at embracing her detailed and thoughtful creative ambition and letting it run wild. If Doechii is a swamp princess, then irony is her swamp. Various means of irony and laughing at the self or others, Doechii can reflect back upon her own journey and invite us in on that reflection and drawing out the comedic and sometimes tragic, self-worth, self-knowledge, and growth. For this mixtape cover, Doechii shares with us a raw portrayal of herself with a sucker punch of symbolism and visual command. And with further examination, we can see that she is working on more levels than we previously knew. This mixtape cover gets richer and more meaningful over time, aligning with the experience of her music as well. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this deep dive and art analysis, please check out my channel, leave me a comment, a like, subscribe, check out my online Etsy store. Until the next time, enjoy art so you can enjoy more of your life. Thank you so much.